Welcome to another episode of Inside Evo. I'm Nick Trott, editor of Evo, and Mike Duff's here with us today, who's the motoring editor. Today we're going to talk about a very special story that appeared in issue 185 of Evo. If you can see that, it was a story about Ayrton Senna's Mercedes 190 that he raced at the Nürburgring in the 80s. And it's also a story, Mike, about something else. It's a very personal story to you. Why is this?
Yes, that's a fair summary. Because I own a very, very similar car. I own a 1990 Mercedes 190 2.5, so slightly more powerful, but otherwise effectively identical. And one of the main reasons I bought the car, I suppose, deep in my mind, was the memory of this race, which was a fairly remarkable thing by the standards of one-make racing at the time. I've not been able to find any example of a race that had more Formula One world champions in it.
So let me get this straight. We had Lauda, Prost.
Yep.
James Hunt. Was he sober?
To judge from the pictures on the grid, he was certainly sober at race time, but the contemporary reports said that there was a very big gala dinner the night before.
Right.
And it did sound like quite a lot of the drivers were absolutely on it. So I imagine that there were some fairly serious hangovers on the grid for that race.
So this is something we'd never see today, isn't it? We saw absolute world champions, the best in the breed. But we also saw Senna, who at that time actually hadn't really broken through. He was a sensation, had done Formula Ford, Formula 3, and was driving for F1 in...
He was driving a Toleman that year in F1, and he many people, when they talk about the story, they seem to remember that Senna was a nobody. Of course he wasn't, he was already in F1 at the time, but he was still definitely the least well-known person on that grid. It was 9 former world champions, and then you had Senna and Prost, so you had 2 future world champions as well. And it was the race to celebrate the opening of the new Nürburgring.
Okay.
So what we think of as the GP circuit now. So this took place in 1984, and coincidentally it was when Mercedes had just launched the 190e, which of course is, as we all know, the epitome of 1980s sports saloons. And they...
30M3.
Well, obviously I couldn't afford an E30M3. And they created this one-off race with identical cars for all of these guys. So it was lots of champions. It was 20 cars, I think. There were lots of champions. There were lots of contemporary F1 drivers, lots of contemporary sports car drivers. There were some guys who'd been driving in the 1950s, going far enough back. Stirling Moss was there.
Really? And who else did you tell me? Was it John Surtees?
Stirling Moss was there. John Surtees was there. I mean, it was even Goodwood. The Goodwood revival. You wouldn't be able to assemble that much talent on one grid at a time.
Yeah. And this wasn't a display. This was a race.
This was a race. Very much a race. It's fair to say that some people took it very seriously, the guys at the front, especially Senna, who went there clearly intending to win. Some of the guys at the back less so. Jacques Lafitte on the grid admitted he didn't know which way the track went. He hadn't done any of the qualifying, hadn't done any of the practice. And it sounds like it was a bit of a free-for-all at the back. People were taking very wide lines, cutting across things. There was quite a bit of rubbing, quite a bit of contact. But the thing that always struck me, and I remember watching one of the documentaries just after Senna died, and there was just a little bit of grainy footage from this race, and you can see how fast he was. You just get that impression of the car that was absolutely at the limit. It was just fast, perfect, not showboating. You can just tell that he took that race incredibly seriously, which sounds daft because he was in Formula One. This was a 200 horsepower saloon car that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things, but he had recognised that he could be seen to beat all of these greats on equal terms in an equal car, and that's why it mattered to him.
Do you think the attitude of some of the other drivers changed when they realised how seriously Senna was taking the race?
I think at the front it was always, the guys at the front all wanted to win and wanted to win very much, and if you actually look at the overall standing, Senna qualified third, was second by the first corner, and then by the end of I think lap 3 he'd got past Prost with what was described as a fairly forceful move to take the lead. He actually won the race from Niki Lauda. I think the margin at the end was something like a second and a half. So
Okay.
you know, over 20 laps,
Yeah.
they were pressing as hard as they could.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, it's a shame that we can't see the race itself. Doesn't seem to be full video footage of the whole thing that survived. There are just snippets.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to go back there and to see Senna's car again.
So this race, the legend of the race, the legend of Senna, genuinely inspired this car purchase.
It was one of the factors, definitely. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's the way that we always get implanted with our memories of cars, the cars we want, the cars we're enthusiastic about. I think we always get implanted when we're sort of in our teenage years. I was 18 when Senna died, and I didn't really know anything of this of the backstory. And it was, as I say, it was one of the documentaries that they did afterwards, and it was just such an amazing story.
Yeah.
And when I found out that the car, not only did it still exist, but it was in Mercedes' own museum in the collection, I was determined to, you know, try and get it back there.
So let's talk about how this story came together. I mean, we obviously discussed it in a features meeting. It was immediate. It was immediately obvious it was a story that we should tell. Then you had to put a call into Mercedes-Benz, I would imagine, and then say, can you dig out this?
Yeah, would you mind going into your museum collection and digging out this very valuable car and transporting it across Germany for us?
Yeah.
I have to say they were brilliant. The guys at Mercedes-Benz Classic, they've got a colossal collection of cars. I mean, hundreds and hundreds. I think it's something over 700 cars. They saw the story straight away. They wanted to do it. They wanted to help. The only concern that they had was the fact that the car basically hasn't been run for 10 years. And obviously they didn't want to risk letting anybody blow it up, which, you know, I could sort of see their point on that one.
They obviously know your reputation, right?
Well, yes, obviously. So we didn't drive the car, but in a way, I think that actually it helped the story, because it was so evocative just to actually be able to sit in the car on the grid, and we were shooting at the end of the day, the light was going down, and you know, you could just imagine, it was just imagination, there was nothing else, but you could just imagine what it was like. And it was a very emotional moment, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you tell me you got in the car and you sat in Senna's seat and you poked around?
I sat in Senna's seat. I heeled and towed on the pedals, which were set up so much better than the ones in my car. So, you know, a bit of Senna magic. But the amazing thing is,
work in your car from that track day that I seem to remember, where they went after three corners.
Yes, it's fair to say my car's perhaps not in the same mechanical condition that the ones at Mercedes-Benz Classic are. But yeah, to actually sit there was amazing, and actually to full credit to Mercedes, they recognised the significance of this car straight away. It finished the race and he's basically in exactly the same condition. It's been out a couple of times. It went to the Festival of Speed one year, but the rest of the time it's been a museum exhibit either in Stuttgart or it used to be at the Nürburgring Experience Centre, and you get in it and you're sitting in Senna's seat. You know, there's the dust in there that you do think, well, you know, good grief, this is probably Senna era dust as well.
So yours is, you mentioned yours is the later car, it's 2.5. The Senna car was a 2.3. Was it a racing car? Did it have a full roll cage, modified engine, exhaust, the whole lot? Or
absolutely was not a racing car. Right. They took 20 cars off the first production run, and because they were early production cars, they had every single option box ticked. So it had an electric sunroof, it still had the radio in, it still had the controls on the door for the electric seats, though obviously it had a bucket seat in there. And looking at the cage, I mean, okay, they were racing on a track with modern standards, but it was a bolt-in cage. It's not a fully welded-in cage. The car still had carpets. The car still had rear seats. It was absolutely a road car.
So you drove your car to Germany.
My car to Germany, yeah.
We have pictures of your car in the feature. Don't forget to subscribe to Evo if you want to read more great stories like this. Have to get that one in there. So yes, you drove your car to the Nürburgring. Any problems, dramas along the way?
Absolutely no problems on the way to the Nürburgring at all.
Should we stop there?
Everything was fine. 145 miles an hour on the autobahn, which I don't know who was more surprised by that, me, the car, or possibly Dean, the photographer, in the passenger seat. But then when we got there was a Touristfahrer session going on the Nordschleife, and so, you know, as you do, you think, well, I can't not really, can I? I've got to do it. I've got to do a couple of laps for the cameras. So I did.
Yes, and yeah, there's nothing else to report.
Well, almost nothing else. But I thought I got away with it. I mean, I'm always a little bit superstitious about old cars and using them on track. In my experience, they do usually break. And I got away, came out of 2 laps of the Nordschleife thinking, that's, you know, the brakes held up, the tyres held up. I wasn't the fastest thing on track, unsurprisingly. Wasn't the slowest thing either, to be fair. So yeah, I came away thinking I've got away with it, and then Dean went to open the boot of the car to put his photographic gear in and said, there's quite a lot of oil back here. And there was okay. A lot of oil back there.
Right.
Well, to cut a long story short, I had visions that I'd blown up the engine, the gearbox, the differential. I hadn't, fortunately. I thought I'd blown up the power steering system because there was an empty hydraulic fluid bottle under the reservoir under the bonnet. But it turned out a German mechanic told me in no uncertain terms, making it clear he thought I was an idiot, that this was actually the self-levelling rear suspension. So if you had to blow up one thing on an elderly Mercedes 190, it was probably the least important thing. Right. So it meant the car could still drive. Yeah, bit of a battle scar.
You got it back to the UK, no problems at all now. Got it fixed. Yeah.
Got it back to the UK. It's got a couple of different problems now, but there's nothing to do with the story and can't be blamed on anything that happened out there.
Good job Senna didn't drive it then.
Yeah, probably that one, yeah.
Would have made a mess of it. Do you feel differently about your car, having done this story?
Yeah, in a strange way I do, actually. It's made me realise that it's a proper car. You know, you tend to sort of view GTIs, you know, performance derivatives of cars, you sort of think maybe they were more for marketing. And of course the fascinating thing about the 190E was it was originally the Cosworth engined version, the 16-valve version. It was designed for rallying. Yeah. And then, of course, Audi brought out the Quattro, and there was absolutely no point finishing a two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive rally car. And so they had to find a use for it. This was one of the uses for it. They set some records at Nardo, and of course it became the basis for a DTM racer that stayed competitive into the 1990s. So it was a very proper car, and it made me realise that it's a car that's got a huge amount of history, it's got a huge amount of heritage, and a car that is actually still very important to Mercedes. You know, they've just brought out another 4-cylinder performance car for the first time since it was cancelled with the A45 and the CLA 45, and you know, in many ways it showed that Mercedes could make small, fast cars. Yeah. And it was the first of them.
So is it a keeper?
I don't have any plans to get rid of it, it's fair to say. Well, I do every so often when something goes wrong or something breaks, then I sort of think, well, maybe. But actually, you know, it's a hell of a car, and I just love driving it. And it's not that fast by modern standards. You know, as we were driving across Belgium, if you're on the Belgian autoroute and it clears and there's a BMW 320D in front of you and he puts his foot down, then, you know, you have to work surprisingly hard to actually overwhelm that car. But it's one of those cars that makes you realise that straight line performance really is not that much of a metric for measuring a performance car, because it's about everything else, really. Yeah.
Mike, thanks for your time today. A great story. I think one of the strongest stories we've done this year, and the Senna aspect, I think, makes it very, very personal to you, but I think personal for all car enthusiasts as well. You know, I think the world lost a great talent, obviously, and it's a shame there isn't more video of this race. There's a little bit out there, but if you can track it down on YouTube, it's worth looking for. Don't forget to subscribe to Evo TV on YouTube for more videos like this. There'll be more Inside Evo episodes to follow. And thanks again, Mike, for your time. We'll see you at the next one.